Hey, what's going on there, guys? Bo here with Top Deck Cards and Games, and I'm back with another video for Magic for you guys. So today we're talking about the ban list, and for those of you guys that are unaware, these cards are now banned for Magic. So for the standard format, Reflector Mage, Smuggler's Copter, and Emrakul are banned. For Modern, Jataxian Probe and Golgari Grave Troll are banned. This is effective come January 20th for paper and January 11th for online Magic. So even before the pre-release and like the release of Aether Revolt and everything like that. So one thing that's noteworthy is that they made a change to the way that the actual bannings were going to work, in that it's still pretty much going to have the same pace with them banning stuff prior to the release of sets like they would normally would, but they're also going to be doing a banning after the Pro Tour, 5 weeks after. So they're trying to keep up with the format in that they're going to be doing more bannings per actual set release than normal, twice as much actually. But I don't know. I feel like this was appropriate. I feel like this was coming only because of Emrakul. And for those of you guys that have played a decent bit of Standard, you'll agree with that Emrakul was a problem, especially in the Marvel decks. Being able to consistently hit a card like this off the top, even though likely on turn 4, turn 5, wherever you're finding yourself actually activating the Marvel and getting a free card, Ulamog was always just more kind of like game ending, just because you really can't do anything like on the crackback whenever you're in that position. But at the same pace, Emrakul was absolutely just as bad. Having your opponent take your turn, waste your resources, waste the removal on like a servant, or waste the removal on some other stupid stuff is a problem. Having your opponent be able to take your turn and then pit you with a 13-13 that had a narrow set of answers that you had to have to get rid of it was a problem. Reflector Mage is an interesting one in this list. I think largely because whenever you take away these cards, whenever you take away Smuggler's Copter and you take away Emrakul, the format tends to shift one way or another. And I think that in their assessment of how things were going to play out, in their assessment of what the format would actually be structured like after these cards were banned, Reflector Mage was just a little bit way too good. I think if there was ever a place that Reflector Mage should have been banned, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to agree with this, is during Collected Company season. Collected Company with Reflector Mage was easily the most annoying thing outside of the Collected Company actually being cast itself. Reflector Mage has been such a huge factor in the Standard metagame since its printing. The card has always just been relevant. It's always been good, and even like on its worst days, it's still seen play here or there. I think that the Copter and the Emrakul are the most appropriate. Copter being the hardest to deal with card in the format as far as like fair cards go, largely just because it requires your opponent to play the game in a certain regard where they're keeping removal open or they're bluffing removal open, and people are maybe keeping or playing cards like Blossoming Defense to keep their Copters alive. Even just the whole interaction with your opponent having like removal that deals damage or destroys, you having a Selfless Spirit post-crew. The card was just so annoying to have to play against. I mean, Copter is like easily the most played card that I've played with this Standard, but I think that I think Copter was still probably appropriate. The card's probably way too good for its time. Like I was talking to Zach about, it seems like every time we have an artifact set, they go, oops, we absolutely screwed up. We absolutely made a huge mistake here, and we have to fix our oopsies. And I can't imagine that in the future when they make another artifact set, that's not going to happen again. Copter is way too good. I feel like there's probably also some factoring in Aether Revolt that they were trying to weigh in on as well, whether that be Heart of Kirin or some other cards that exist that are going to be coming out that might give partial or full synergy to cards like Copter existing. Even though Heart of Kirin was like an okay answer to Copter, it still requires playing the game out to a certain pace, or having certain things open, or having a certain board state that you need to accommodate to be able to block the copter, and that is also assuming your opponent doesn't have removal, whether it be at instant speed or removal to get rid of the Heart of Kirin in general. So the game doesn't play out in the fashion, manner, or style that Wizards wants Standard to actually be at. I think that's the problem. That's the biggest problem that they have whenever you're structuring cards and you're designing these cards and you want people to actually be engaged and to play this game. Another problem is the pace at which games play out whenever you're at bigger events, especially with the feature match area. Whenever you have cards like Emrakul factoring into play, you get these huge, long, drawn-out turns where people are trying to decide what's going on, and likely a lot of time has passed in your opponent just being able to manipulate a turn and think through plays while still like progressing the board state, taking more time than would usually be taken on a turn to play out anything that's going on. And then you also have to factor it, like a player is going to be taking another turn after that and then passes back to your opponent. So it's just creating more of a bubble in time, and it's eating up more time off the clock than should be. And it doesn't make for really entertaining gameplay whenever you're watching any of this pan out. Especially whenever it comes down to any of these matches going to time, and then you have these huge turns that are actually happening where certain players are only getting X amount of allotted turns because your opponent took one of them away from you, and that counts towards the 5. So I think that's another big problem with Emrakul and cards like Emrakul, where it's not designed the same way as Mindslaver. It's designed as something much more uniquely distinct in regard to take turn effects. It's not like a literal take turn effect. It's just so much more, and that's what's actually causing the problem there. As for Modern, I probably have a far less words to give about Modern than I ever would about Standard and these cards. But Gitaxian Probe seems like the biggest reason why they wanted that card gone was for decks like Suicide and Infect, where having full knowledge of your opponent's hand and being able to use Gitaxian Probe as like a cantrip for free, well, paying the 2 life it's essentially free for those decks. Being able to see your opponent's hand for free and then still having the mana open to manipulate how much damage you're pushing through, whether that's like lethal or well over lethal given what your opponent's actually able to do against you. Gitaxian Probe is just it's a huge accelerator for those types of decks that just whenever they know you don't have anything, they're just going to fire off, or whether they have the cards to be able to answer whatever you're doing. Them having the knowledge is a problem. I don't think that a card like Peak is going to necessarily replace Gitaxian Probe, just because you've seen in prior seasons of play where decks like Splinter Twin would play Peak, but Peak was played in there because it was instant speed. You got the knowledge at the end of your opponent's turn, minus any manipulation, card draw effects, or anything like that they could have. And from there, you get to assess what you get to do on your following turn. With Gitaxian Probe, with these decks, especially with like Suicide, because you want to lose the life in general, and even Infect, all of your power plays are going to happen in one turn. Your combo, your win, all that's just going to happen in one turn. And being able to find that sweet spot just by knowing what your opponent's hand is probably not the healthiest thing that you want. It's not like they went and nerfed cards like out of those decks. It's not like they took Kiln Fiend out or Death Shadow out, or they went for Infect and took like Might of Old Krosa or something like that. They just went for a card that was giving them more knowledge, more accessibility to do what their deck actually does, and to be able to just pound you without you being able to play the game, basically, because a lot of times you're really not playing the game whenever decks like Infect or Suicide are just winning on like turn 3. Golgari Grave Troll probably has a similar house in Dredge, where that Grave Troll being able to allow you to dredge 6 was really good. I think that it probably would have been more appropriate if they would have went for Cathartic Reunion, just because that would hammer the deck out of the format entirely. But at the same time, I think they probably just want to nerf the deck down a little bit. The Dredge players, they can still play Golgari Thug. It's not like it's completely impossible to play Dredge. It's just a little bit harder whenever your max Dredge is 5 instead of 6 now. It's just more interesting because like Golgari Grave Troll in and of itself, that card was actually another way that you got to win if your opponent was just taking away your resources. If they went and like surgically extracted your prized amalgams and your blood gas and stuff like that, Golgari Grave Troll was still a way for you to try to win the game. You could still have a well overclocked graveyard full of creatures and then just play a Golgari Grave Troll and set it on the battlefield and go, all right, well, I'm just going to pound you. Do you have a terminate effect or something? No. Well, I'm just going to pound you. You better have a path. I think it's definitely appropriate to a degree that a card from Dredge got hit. I would have liked to have seen Cathartic Reunion, but that's just me being way too wishful with cards that would just completely kill the deck. I don't think Dredge is dead by any means. I think you can still play it with Thug, and you can still get away with the stupid stuff that the deck was doing in general. But I think whenever you have one less card being dredged each time, and your numbers pan out to you missing some free extra dredge cards that you would have had with Golgari Grave Troll, stuff is kept in check a little bit better. But that's what I've got for you guys. That is my assessment of the ban list so far for Modern and Standard, and what we have changed going onwards with Aether Revolt. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Stir up some conversation. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed this content and want to see more. And until next time, guys, thank you for watching and peace out.